15 years after the original release of World of Warcraft, Classic was finally here. This base version of the game was something fans of the MMO had begged for years. Much like other games, people believe that the current version of World of Warcraft has strayed too far from its original ideas and core gameplay, that the new WoW is not the one they fell in love with, and that this classic release would bring back the magic they experienced when playing WoW for the first time. After massive pushback from the developers for several years,
you think you do, but you don't.
They finally caved and the game was now out for everybody to play. The launch of World of Warcraft Classic was a huge success, with millions of players logging into servers on day one. People got to relive the game as they did back in the day, playing through the massive original world of Azeroth, leveling slowly and making their way to 60, the max level. But players today are a bit better than they were 15 years ago, and it did not take long for the controversy to start. Ragnaros the Fire Lord is the final boss of Molten Core, the first raid in World of Warcraft. Ragnaros took 5 months after the launch of the original World of Warcraft to be defeated. In WoW Classic, it took 6 days. Now, this might not be too weird considering the plethora of factors why games are easier today, including better computers, better internet, more experience and skill, etc. Plus the fact that people came into this game knowing the contents. But this nonetheless shattered a lot of people's rose-tinted glasses they had about the game. They remembered the original World of Warcraft as a truly difficult game, but in reality it was really only that hard because of circumstance. Games today are in general way harder, and that includes the live version of WoW. Now the 6-day push for Ragnaros include the leveling process to reach max level, which in and of itself took 5 days. This means the actual raid took 1 day to beat, with newly leveled characters and garbage equipment. One thing was clear. This game was too easy for a competitive raiding scene, the likes of which retail WoW has. When a new raid in retail World of Warcraft is released, thousands of players stay up for 10+ hours a day for multiple weeks in the race to World First, battling some of the most difficult content in gaming out there with sometimes hundreds of attempts to kill a single boss. A race of such magnitude would not be possible in Classic, with new raids being beaten in only a few hours instead of weeks. So what do you do instead? Easy games are not something new, but the beauty of a well-designed game is that even if it's easy to beat, it can also be difficult to master. Games like this are a perfect match for speedrunning. If content isn't difficult enough, just make it difficult. Since speedrunning is a sort of choose your own difficulty, meaning there is always a way to go faster, it will just make it harder. It was the perfect fit for people looking for competition. Speedrunning is not something new, but World of Warcraft as a game completely changes what speedrunning means. In a raid, you are 40 people playing at once. This means that if even one person plays badly, you all suffer. On top of that, you can only do a raid once every week. Now you might think that seems a bit counterintuitive. Speedruns traditionally are a way of optimizing and pushing the game to its absolute limits, and how do you do that without constant practice? But it actually turns out that having such a limit puts an incredible twist on the entire thing. Because you only have one shot a week, you have to refine your knowledge and skills outside of your actual speedrun. You can think of it as a game of sports, where you can practice however much you like, but once you're in a game, once you're on that stage, it's do or die. This allows for some amazing variety, where each and every guild tries different strategies with equal success because no run will ever be perfect when you're 40 people with one shot a week. But this of course did not stop people from trying to achieve perfection. As the game went on, the strategies turned from being as simple as go fast to the most insane skips and crazy coordinated plays. We begin in Naxxramas, the final tier of WoW Classic, where speedruns are about to meet their peak. This is the story about the unthinkable, of how World of Warcraft became one of the most insane speedrunning games ever.
Yeah! So fucking dumb, Prefox. I'm literally carrying you with my voice, and you choose to ignore me?
Like, fuck off with that. So dumb.
Turn, yo, are you dumb in the fucking head?
The world first clear of Naxxramas in Classic was done by the European Guild Progress.
Hey, there it is, boys. Let's go.
Setting the record at 1 hour, 21 minutes and 55 seconds. Now speedruns at the beginning of a quote-unquote tier, which is the release of a new raid, are usually pretty tame, because at this point people are prioritizing gearing up their characters and running as many splits as possible. Essentially, there are a few pieces of loot that are so good that you want to put your characters prioritized for loot in different raids, so you get as many of those pieces as possible. Of course, this means you're spreading your best characters very thin, and speedrunning usually isn't possible at this time. Still, it didn't take too long for the first sub-hour clear of Naxxramas to happen. 1 month and 14 days after the raid's release on December 1st, the European Guild Salad Bakers set the new world record at 59 minutes and 44 seconds. The run featured 18 deaths in total, and while impressive for its time, it was clear that there is still a lot to optimize. Okay, let's talk about China. World of Warcraft in China is not only very popular, but its servers are also run by another company, who, ironically enough, seem more invested in the game and community than Blizzard themselves. Because of this, China had access to something called tournament realms for a few weeks at a time. This put the region at a bit of an advantage compared to the West, because they had the chance to practice risk-free. The 1 raid per week limits put pressure on the players to make every run count, and while this does make things more interesting, it also limits the testing of new strategies, because of the risk involved. With the Chinese tournament realm, they didn't have to worry about these risks. They could practice any strategy they wanted as many times as they wished, as long as the servers were up. And this brings us over to Grand Widow Ferlina, the starting point for our descent into madness.
Your old lives, your mortal desires mean nothing.
没事，来得及的。好，来15了啊！嗑药，别碰蜘蛛啊！别碰蜘蛛，别碰蜘蛛，别碰蜘蛛啊！穿过它没事儿，不要紧的。回头咱们可能解毒还有踢的嘲讽得迅速点，00，准时炸啊！别提前打。炸！继续交群场来解毒，蜘蛛来了啊！这样比较完美的啊，对我们来讲比较安全。
This was unlike anything anybody had ever seen or done before. Variations of this strategy had been executed on old private servers, but never to this extent. The coding on those community servers was different, making it easier. But here, on Classic, if even one person were to mess this up, if even one thing went wrong, all of their team would be instantly dead. But not only did they survive, they managed to kill an obscene amount of enemies in a fraction of a second, saving several minutes in their speedrun. Now let me tell you, this is not exactly the intended way to do it. Normally, pulling even one too many of these packs will result in a raid wipe. But by using a particular combo of items and abilities, they managed to kill the enemy so fast that the computer doesn't even have time to realize the players are there. Okay, listen. If you are about to follow anything I'm about to say, I need you to keep track of 4 things for me, okay? Number 1 is Invisibility Potion. Simple as that. If you use it, you go invisible for 18 seconds. Number 2 is Goblin Sapper Charge. If you use this item, you take a moderate amount of damage, then deal a slightly more moderate amount of damage to all enemies around you. Then number 3 is Divine Shield, which is an ability specific to paladins. It makes you immune to all forms of damage for 12 seconds. Then lastly, number 4, Flask of Petrification, an item that makes you immune to all forms of damage for 1 minute, but you are paralyzed while it's active and cannot do anything yourself. On top of this, you're only allowed to use 5 in total, spread across your entire raid team. Now, it goes a little something like this. Have your paladin run up ahead and use Divine Shield to pull as many enemies as possible before using Flask of Petrification, stacking all the enemies up. Then, have your second paladin Invis Potion past your first paladin, pop their shield and pull even more enemies to you. Then, your entire raid team, which have been hiding around the corner so that the enemies can't spot them, also all use their invisibility potion to run up to the massive pack of enemies, and before the invisibility runs out, make sure to use their sapper charges all at the same time. Okay, so I said 1 sapper charge deals a moderate amount of damage, but we are now using 40 all at the same time. And this is just barely enough to kill all the enemies in 1 game batch, allowing the raid to survive unscathed. This run was made by the Chinese Guild Noobs, and it actually happened just a few hours, 1 day after the first sub-hour run by Salad Bakers, and it smashed their record by more than 2 minutes, placing Noobs as the number 1 with a time of 57:27. Having access to the tournament realm made noobs seem unstoppable, with every Western guild fighting for second place, merely copying the strategies that noobs were able to invent. Or so it seemed. Not 6 days later, the game was about to change forever. Blizzard announced a new patch for Classic, seemingly out of nowhere. Along with having a few very anticipated changes, it included something even more important: PTR. PTR stands for Public Test Realm, and it's where Blizzard allows players to beta test an update. Now, this is significant because of one reason: practice. Up until now, you only had one raid a week. On PTR, however, you can copy as many characters as you want. If you die, you can just copy a new character and go again. If you clear the raid, just copy and go again. This allows for infinite mistakes as long as the 40 people in your raid have the time. There's one kicker though: the runs done on PTR do not count on the actual ladder, so you still only have one attempt a week to actually perform everything you've practiced. But this changed everything. People now had the resources to really test and iron out all the risky shit they previously couldn't afford to do. It also put all the regions equal footing. The real race could finally begin. The little trick noobs pulled off allowed guilds to easily reach a sub-hour clear. But what it did even more than that was light fire in everybody's asses to quickly try and invent new things. Guilds were now frantically racing to be the first sub 50, and it was now more than ever creativity really mattered. Since Naxxramas has 4 different wings, it gives you an insane amount of variance of where you start and where you go. Because of this variance, there was so much room for improvement. Guilds found new ways to optimize starting points, routes, and what order to clear the wings in. The European Guild Progress came very close to beating the sub 50 by finding new ways to utilize the technology, as well as finding similar tactics in other places. Some new popular strategies emerged around this time, which included having some of your healers log out before the boss Lotheb, because the boss puts a debuff on you that lasts until a minute after the fight, making you unable to heal. But by having your healers log out and then back in once the boss is dead, it allows the raid to continue on, although a bit more cautiously, with an actual healer or two. Another new tactic was during the boss fight Gothic the Harvester. It's an encounter where the boss locks you in his room and you have to fight multiple waves of enemies before you defeat him, which is usually very easy, but it takes up a bunch of your time because you cannot speed up the waves. They are on a set timer. But people found a way to jump through his gate even when locked. And this allowed that one player to go bring more enemies from up ahead into the boss fight. That way you actually used all the downtime for something useful, pre-clearing the path up ahead, allowing you to walk all the way to the next boss after the fight. Sadly, this was not enough for Progress to get below 50 minutes, ending their run at an impressive 51:36. But the technology for a sub 50 run is there. We just needed somebody to do it all a bit better and a bit faster. At this point, it also seemed like a bunch of guilds asked the question, how many warriors can we bring until it's too many? And the answer always seemed to be not enough. With a roster of 40 people, you have to balance your 3 roles perfectly, being tanks, healers, and DPS. The goal is to fit as many DPS in as possible, because they are your damage dealers. The more damage you deal, the faster you go. But you need to do this without dying from lack of healing. Warriors are so heavily stacked because they gain resources based on the damage they deal, so they scale insanely well with buffs and gear. That plus the fact that they don't have mana, which other classes have that they need to regenerate, means that warriors never have downtime. That's why raid setups always look like this. You fit in warlocks for a few necessary debuffs to make enemies take more damage, and mages because they have incredible area of effect burst potential, which is useful in a few places. Next in line for the sub 50 attempt was the guild we had a look at previously, the Chinese guild Noobs. They used all the same tricks: log out on Lotheb, pull enemies into Gothic the Harvester, the 4 horsemen cleave plus the new horse sapper pull. But sadly it was not enough to break the sub 50, landing them a very good but not good enough time of 50:52. It wasn't until a whole month later where the European guild None of the Above emerged. These guys are the record holders for the fastest run of the previous raid, Ankiraj, and they came out guns blazing to prove themselves yet again in Naxxramas. After managing to fit an impressive 21 warriors into the raid group, over half the raid team stacked with a single class, they mowed down the enemies in Naxxramas. Not really using any particular new strategy, just doing it better and faster than anybody previously. You have to understand, while these fights are easy, that doesn't mean you can mess up. You run the risk of wiping your entire raid team with sometimes just one mistake. It's all about finding the balance of how fast you can go while also staying alive. And None of the Above did just that, and they managed to smash the record with a 48 minutes and 48 seconds run. The first guild to clear Naxxramas sub 50 minutes.
You are not prepared!
The announcement of Burning Crusade Classic, the first expansion to World of Warcraft, put a ticking time bomb on the life of Naxxramas speedruns. Guilds knew that they didn't have much time left to perfect their strategies, but even so, beating None of the Above by just playing better at this point seemed unlikely. The guilds needed something new, something big if they were to set new records. In the last 2 months of Naxxramas speedrunning, the game went a little bit crazy. We have now finished our descent into madness and reached insanity. In the coming months, the game got pushed to limits it had never seen before, and speedruns have now become a convoluted series of perfect pulls and execution, and with one mistake from virtually anybody, it's game over. People found crazy ways to do already crazy pulls, and on some of them they even found ways to just skip the entire thing. They managed to drag enemies out of the way long enough to just kill the boss and never have to deal with the trash at all. Skipping enemies became super common. If you could skip it, it saves time. Usually this was done by one player going up ahead and dragging the enemies out of the path of the raid team, letting them run past. The starting spots for run also became creative, with teams finding ways to sneak into the first boss room without killing any enemies, allowing them to set up all the massive pulls while the rest of the raid fights the boss, gaining them the initial seconds of pulling everything together. The Guild Progress, one of the top 4 guilds in the running for World First, announced that they will no longer be streaming their runs, nor will they upload the logs until the very end of Classic. This means nobody will know what's going on in their raids until it is too late. Supposedly this means Progress found something huge, something massive that will give them such an advantage over the other guilds if they don't leak it. So here we are. The final stretch of insanity, the craziest merge of 2 separate bosses ever seen, leading to a massive time skip. Welcome to Thaddius and Saphiron. To understand what's so truly deranged about this strategy, I first need to quickly explain how the Thaddius fight works. You split your raid into 2 separate teams to fight 2 mini-bosses on 2 separate platforms. After you kill these 2 guys, you then jump down to the main platform to fight Thaddius. Thaddius really only has one mechanic, which is polarity shift. This ability applies either a negative or a positive charge to a player. If you have a different charge than the player next to you, you electrocute yourself and that player, killing yourself and possibly everyone around you. Essentially, your raid team needs to be split into 2 sides again, with 1 positive charge and 1 negative charge side. But for each person with the same charge next to you, you deal 10% extra damage, which then adds up to 190% extra damage, or around 3 times the amount you deal normally. Now, since Thaddius has a stupid amount of health, this lets you tackle the boss in a reasonable amount of time. Thaddius also recasts the polarity shift at times, which forces people to change sides. After you kill Thaddius, you need to quickly spread your raid team out, because when the polarity shift runs out, you will blow up based on the amount of people close to you. But here's the trick. Polarity lasts for 1 minute if you kill the boss just as they recast it. This allows you to have 1 minute of 3 times the amount of damage before you all blow up and die a tragic electrocharge death. If you clear all the 4 wings, you can then face Saphiron, which means that if Thaddius is the last boss out of the 4 wings you face, you will teleport directly into Saphiron's room after defeating the boss. Saphiron takes about 30 seconds to spawn. This means you now have 30 seconds left before you explode. The reason why it's so beneficial to kill this dragon quickly is because it has an air phase. After around 1 minute into the fight, it flies up into the air, making it unattackable by all the warriors, losing you about a minute of time, which is, massive in a race about seconds. So, with the debuff ticking out, you now have 30 seconds to kill this Undead Dragon. But of course that's not all. Since the damage increase only works when you are stacked up, it means you need to create 2 groups in this room as well. And yeah, the big Undead Dragon also has mechanics you need to deal with. 2 notable abilities are a huge frontal cleave as well as a deadly blizzard that can spawn on top of raid members. Both of these are a huge issue when you are stacked up and half your raid team is in front of the dragon, within range of its cleave. Luckily, We actually know the timings of these things, and we can use a little thing called limited invulnerability potion, which makes the user immune to physical damage for 6 seconds and time it to perfectly avoid the cleave. Now all you have to do is pop all your DPS cooldowns and burn the boss, and congrats, it's dead. Well, except now we have about 5 seconds left until the debuff from Thaddius runs out and you and your entire raid team explodes into blue fireworks. Do you remember the Flask of Petrification? I said you could only use a total of 5 of them in your entire raid team. Well, that's a technicality. The logs only allow you to use 5 for your speedrun to be valid. But the thing about logs is that they can only check you when you are in combat. As soon as the boss dies, combat is considered over. This means any action you take after the boss dies, the log cannot register. This includes Flask of Petrification. So by instantly having everybody use the flask after the boss dies, your raid team is now immune to damage, and you can safely blow up without anybody dying.
Yeah, 30 seconds on the clock, the kill was 28? Jesus.
And there's
Yeah.
dead. Just fucking 23-second kill.
And 2 seconds to spread?
No, it's no spreading. 40-man Petri, of course.
Okay. You motherfuckers, dude. Like, no. Well, actually, though, I hate this. I hate this.
I figured you'd.
And there you go, you've done it. Now all you need to do is kill the final boss Kel'Thuzad and you have your world record. This was Progress's ultimate card, the ace up their sleeve guaranteed to secure them their first place. But it was not meant to be. During the time Progress had gone dark, the guild None of the Above actually figured out the strategy on their own, and they streamed it, revealing it for the entire world to see.
Fucking hype, dude!
With their hidden tactic out in the open, Progress released their logs and videos, and now every guild has an even footing in the race to the fastest clear, before the game ends. Burning Crusade was now just mere weeks away from being released. The race was on, for one last time. The top 4 guilds, Progress, Noobs, Salad Bakers and None of the Above, were all in contention for first place, and they all tried desperately to get as many runs in as humanly possible, even going as far as borrowing other accounts just so they had one more shot. On April 20th, None of the Above started close to what you would call a perfect run. Every pull was flawless. They killed enemies so fast that they barely had to stop running between packs. Every skip, every boss was done to basically perfection. In the entire run, they had only 2 deaths until they reached the final boss, Kel'Thuzad.
Minions, servants, soldiers of the cold dark, obey the call of Kel'Thuzad!
Let me quickly explain how this guy works. He has multiple abilities with varying levels of difficulty, but the thing is he doesn't have a set timer when he uses these abilities. Instead, they are all on a cooldown, and when he casts he can choose any ability that is off cooldown. That means that even if his most deadly abilities are available, he still might not use them. And this is heavily dependent on luck. Now, it doesn't really make this boss more difficult for a speedrun, but it does make it take longer if you roll something like the Mind Control instead of the Frostbolt Volley. And that's exactly what happened to None of the Above. Their perfect run hit a wall called RNG. Kel'Thuzad consistently chose the most deadly spells, extending the fight for quite some time, as well as killing off a few players. But even with this unlucky streak, they still managed to secure their first spot, the first sub 44 minutes clear, landing the record at 43:48. An absolutely unbelievable and impressive time to beat. A few months ago, it was impressive when people beat sub-hour, and now we have reduced that time by more than 16 minutes, and it looked to remain as the world record. For an entire week, guilds tried multiple times to beat it, but to no avail, until 9 days later, on April 29th, 2021. China came back for one final round. Noobs started their attempt. A similar one to Noda, with very few deaths and some incredibly smooth execution. A few tactics were different here and there. They opted to skip the Ferlina trash instead of killing it with the spiders, but largely the run was the same. All the skips were on point. The Saphiron tactic went well, and they arrived at the gates of Kel'Thuzad. The gates opened at 36 minutes and 43 seconds into the run, in comparison to None of the Above, which opened 6 seconds earlier, at 36:37. Noobs were 6 seconds behind Noda at this point. All they needed was a bit of luck and a clean kill on Kel'Thuzad, and they got exactly that. 0 mind controls, 0 ice tombs, not a single thing stopping them from claiming the fastest time in the world and the final record of the game's life at 43 minutes and 29 seconds. Even though the game was not quite over yet, this would remain the world record, as 2 weeks later, during the last day of the game, 2 more valiant attempts were made by salad bakers in progress, clocking in at 44:19 and 44:20 respectively. There were also some crazy unseen tactics tested in this time by noobs, where they managed to pull off the fabled military one pull, where the entire upstairs and bottom stairs of the military wing was pulled into one, and they charged in with special items to kill them all. I could go into why this is so incredibly impressive, but you probably understand at this point that everything in here is insane. Sadly, they wiped at a later point in the raid, so this run got lost. And they tried 4 more times in the week, but never succeeded with the strategy again. And thus, the game ended. Burning Crusade pre-patch was deployed, and the era of Naxxramas speedrunning was over, with the Chinese guild noobs at the top with a 43:29 run. We will probably never see anything this crazy and ridiculous ever again. While Burning Crusade speedrunning still exists and is fun in its own regard, the expansion also fixed a lot of the mechanics we see at play here, and in general just streamlined the game a bit more. Classic World of Warcraft truly was an experience that is unlike any other game, and even if you didn't play through it, I hope this video gave you a taste of what it was like. Thanks for watching.